Hi, my name is Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to my April wrap up. So we are kicking this off on the 16th of April. It's a Wednesday. I'm off work. I'm off work now for 7 days, which is lovely. So far this month I have read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 books and DNF 2. So unusually, I have set a TBR for April. I did a video about it because there's 2 readathons that I want to join in with. So the first is my good friend Charlie's readathon, which is Books for Bowel Cancer. And so far I have read 2 books for that. And then I also want to join in with Katie from Books and Things TBR clearout readathon, which, as the name suggests, is about reading books from your TBR. It is one of my goals this year to try and read books from my physical TBR. Not exclusively, I am still using the library, but my aim by the end of the year is to have more shelf space, basically. So what I've done for both Katie and Charlie's readathon, I've actually chosen books from my physical TBR. So that comes to 10 books in total from my physical TBR that I am hoping to read in April. Now that may be a little ambitious because I also have several library books out at the moment, as always. So there's a chance some of the readathon reading may potentially be pushed into May. But I do have time off with not too much planned, so I'm hoping to get some good reading done. So let me go through what I've read so far. For Charlie's readathon. So for the prompt, let me consult my notes. For Charlie's readathon, there are several symptoms, which are the symptoms of bowel cancer, and then each symptom is linked to a bookish prompt. And the idea is to raise awareness of the symptoms of bowel cancer. So for the symptom, bleeding from your bottom, the prompt is a book with red on the cover. So for that, I chose the Tokyo Zodiac Murders by Soji Shimada, which is translated from Japanese by Ross and Shika Mackenzie. So this is a book I've been meaning to read for a while. It's been on my shelf probably for about a year now, and I'm surprised it's taken me this long to get to it. It is one of the most well-known like Japanese murder mysteries. It's a very well-known locked room mystery, and I have read from this author before and enjoyed the other book that I read, which was Murder in the Crooked House. And I did really enjoy this, and it was actually quite a quick read. I was expecting it to be maybe a bit denser or a bit more difficult to follow than it actually was. So this is set in the 1970s, and we're following 2 men who, one of them is an illustrator and one of them is an astrologer. And they are, along with many other people, obsessed with these murders that took place in the 1930s. So in the 1930s, this eccentric older artist was found dead in a locked room. So we have our first impossible mystery there. And with him was found this diary, these notes, where he had this plan to murder his 7 daughters and nieces. So there's 7 of them in total. And he described how he planned to cut up their bodies and take one different body part from each of their bodies to create this one godly woman. There's a word for it in the book, and it was all linked to it's linked to astrology, the different star signs of the girls, linking to the different parts of the body. Then he was going to create this one sort of woman combined of all these body parts, and this was going to be sort of erected in some secret place. So this plan was found alongside this man's dead body, and then soon afterwards the girls all did die and were dismembered. They each had a different body part missing, and so then the mystery is, who did that? Is that, did he not really die? Was that someone else's body? Why has someone else carried out his plan? So I mean, it's pretty heavy on the violence against women, I will say. but it was a really interesting puzzle. If you like puzzle type mysteries, I would really recommend it. I really did enjoy it, and my favourite mysteries are ones where when you get the reveal, it's a surprise, so you don't guess the reveal, but when you hear it, you're like, oh, I should have got it, like it was in reach, but you didn't get it. That's how I think a murder mystery should end. Like, I don't think you should get it, but I think when you find out what it is, you feel like you should have got it. And yeah, it was definitely quite a unique story overall. I like the solution. I found the solution quite satisfying, and yeah, I pleased that I finally got to that one. And then also for Charlie's readathon, for the symptom of, which one is it? It is a pain or a lump in your tummy, and that is a book you've been avoiding, or revisit a soft DNF. So I decided to revisit a book that I DNF'd a few years ago, but with the intention of going back to it at some point. And that is Green for Danger by Christianna Brand. This is another murder mystery. This one was first published in 1945. And this is quite a famous one. It's Christianna Brand's most famous murder mystery. It's the first book I have read from her. So this is set during the Second World War at a military hospital, and a patient dies whilst under anaesthetic, and the suspects are narrowed down to this group of six or seven doctors and nurses who were working on the ward at the time. Now, I didn't love this one. I thought it was okay. I thought to be fair, I'm not really a fan of like war novels in general, so that possibly didn't help with my enjoyment of it. There was the historical setting was like interesting. There was stuff in there that was interesting. It was quite an unusual setting for a murder mystery. I found myself getting kind of confused between the different characters. Probably a me problem, it usually is. And yeah, I quite like the solution. That was, interesting, and yeah, I wouldn't reread it. I wouldn't not recommend it, because it is such a well-regarded murder mystery, but I think maybe for whatever reason it just wasn't quite for me. I need to ask my dad if he has read it and if he wants this, so remind me to do that later. So for Casey's readathon, I've read one book so far. I only finished it this morning. The prompt was to read a book from your TBR that you are very excited to get to. And I chose He Who Whispers by Dickson Carr. Another murder mystery. I'm not talking about these in the order that I read them. So like I wouldn't typically read like 3 murder mysteries back to back. But anyway, here we are. So Dickson Carr is one of my favourite crime writers who was a member, he was an American author, but he was a member of the British Detection Club, one of only 2 Americans to be admitted to the club, and he's the master of the locked room mystery. And I was thinking this morning, I always say that he's my second favourite sort of golden age mystery writer after Agatha Christie, but you know what? He might be tying for first place. I really, really enjoyed this so much. It was really, really good. So this has kind of quite an unusual narrative structure. So typically with your murder mysteries, you've got your setup of people, your death, and then your investigation into what happened. This one opens with a story being recounted of a murder that took place 5 or 6 years previously, whereby a man was found stabbed at the top of a tower. And at the time it happened, there was like witnesses around on the ground, and it's seemingly impossible that this murder could have taken place because there was no evidence of anyone else being there at the time. So we have although it's not quite, it's a kind of a locked room, it's an impossible puzzle type thing. So that's where sort of the book opens up with the story being recounted. And then there's various sort of things happen which link to, in the present day, which link back to this initial sort of impossible murder. This is one of Dickson Carr's quite like over the top and quite theatrical books. Some of his novels are like that, and I do really enjoy them. They almost have a little bit of a gothic undertone, some of them, and this one did have that. There's another mystery later on where we have a woman who is almost frightened to death, and the mystery is around like what on earth could it have been that almost frightened her to death, because like there was no one in the room, there was nothing outside the window, etc. So we have a few sort of like impossible puzzles in there. This was a little bit more leaning into being like an actiony thriller at points, which is not something I tend to like, but there were certain scenes in here that made me sort of think this could very much be a black and white Hitchcock film. There was one chase scene on a train which was just very Hitchcockian to me, and I really, really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the reveals at the end. I'm not going to say what they are, obviously. Like, it is over the top, it is kind of ridiculous, and if this is not your type of thing, you would read it and be like, what, this is like crazy. But I just enjoyed it so much, and that reveal as I was reading it this morning, I had to leave the house quite early to pick up my car. That's a whole other story. And yeah, so when we were getting to the reveal, and this features the character of Dr. Gideon Fell, who's like an amateur detective type thing, who like helps the police out, a bit like a Poirot character. And he was explaining, you know, who done it and how and why to this group, you know, to the group of people, and he was like dragging it out, you know, over several pages, but I was just loving it. It was so good. Really, really enjoyed it. Like, thoroughly enjoyable. Love John Dickson Carr. I need to ask my dad as well if he's read that one. So let's make a separate pile for those books. Right, where should we go to next? I'll talk about... Whoops. Let me talk about this one. This is Nuclear Family by Kate Davies. So I've read one book by Kate Davies before. I mean, does she only have 2 books, maybe? I don't know. She might only have 2 books. Only, as if, like, how many have I got? Anyway, Kate Davies's previous book was called In at the Deep End, which won the Polari Prize. I loved In at the Deep End, and I really, really enjoyed Nuclear Family. Maybe a smidgen less than I enjoyed In at the Deep End, but I still really, really enjoyed it. So this is about a family of grown-up daughters, so 2 twin grown-up daughters and their father. The mother has passed away, and for Christmas one of the daughters decides to buy their father this like DNA testing kit so he can like find out his genealogy and whatever, like a bit of fun. But it prompts her father having to admit that all these years he's been keeping this big secret. Him and his wife were keeping this secret, and the girls were donor conceived. So this sort of sends shockwaves through the family. Each daughter reacts to it very differently. So one of them is like just completely sort of goes off the rails and is really obsessed with wanting to find her like the donor who donated the sperm, and then the other twin is actually kind of much more laid back about it. So the book explores what it can be like to be donor conceived, and I don't think I've ever read a book that talks about that before. The author herself was donor conceived as well, so obviously she is, you know, writing from that perspective and I guess her own experience. But I thought it was a really interesting exploration of parenthood and parental relationships, and in particular the interplay between gender and parenthood, because the 2 girls themselves have complicated relationships with their own parenthood, which I thought was really, really interesting. It is quite a funny book, but it does talk obviously about some like very serious topics as well. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Content warnings on this one around miscarriage and very descriptive instances of that as well, so be aware of that. Another book I read is one I picked up randomly from the library. This is The Faces by Tove Ditlevsen. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. This is translated from Danish by Tina Nonali. This was first published in 1968. It's a very short little novella. I have read a short story collection by this author before, which I really, really loved. And I enjoyed this story as well. It's quite challenging to read and quite emotionally demanding. So it's about this woman who is a writer. She's married, she has children, and she is... Sorry for the interlude. The phone was ringing. Of course I did not answer it because I am not mad. I don't answer my phone when I don't know who's calling. Anyway, so we're following this woman who is sort of descending into real mental distress. And I think it's, as I understand it, I think a lot of it mirrors sort of similar experiences that the author has. The author has a memoir which I do want to read at some point, and the library does have a copy of that as well. But yeah, so this woman who she ends up being admitted to hospital, and she hears voices. And the reason it's called The Faces is she sees faces of people that she knows, like over the people that work in the hospital. So she's confusing who people are. She's hearing voices coming from like the pipes and different things like that. It was a very challenging read, but really excellent. I really do like this author's writing. Yeah, I really did like this, but it is quite a challenging read. Then I have two books that I've read that I don't have copies of, so we'll have to put pictures up here. The first one is a book I read for my library book club, and it was called Midnight at Marble Arch by Anne Perry. It's a terrible title and it's a terrible cover, and it's the 28th book or something in a series. So you might ask, why on earth were you reading the 28th book in a series for your book club? And it's because we are restricted to selecting the books that the library has reading group sets of. And there is like, how many books are on that list? There must be a couple of hundred books on that list. But I mean, I've been a member of this group for over 10 years now. I think it's been going for about 20 years. And obviously every so often a few books will get added on, but it'll be like at most 3 a year. So we're kind of scraping the barrel. So anyway, so we read Midnight at Marble Arch, which is a historical crime novel. And I did read the whole thing, which is good because often I and the other members will DNF the book if we're not enjoying it. I only gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I thought it was okay. It is about the death of 2 women in sort of different circumstances, but there are certain things that link the 2 deaths, and so that when the police are looking into it, they are trying to establish whether there is a connection between these 2 deaths. The book very much talks about violence towards women and sexual violence towards women. So it was overall reasonably well done, I would say, and there was some interesting conversations within there in terms of the different viewpoints. Obviously it was, have I said, it was set in the 1890s, when obviously things were very different, and interesting to see, I guess, how different or not different things were, and yeah, so different viewpoints of the time and stuff like that. And the book itself, I think, was first published about 10 years ago, and even within that there were still certain things in the book that it was a bit like, not sure I quite agree with that, but overall, like, it was okay. It was quite clearly further down in a series, because you had sort of the detective-y type characters and different characters who were clearly had been in previous books, and then clearly been, ongoing storylines between these other characters that you're not privy to the detail of because you're jumping in at book 28 of the series. But hey, it was okay. The most interesting thing about the book is that I didn't realise until we had the meeting last weekend at the library. Anne Perry, she was jailed for 5 years because when she was 15, her and her friend murdered her friend's mother. And I believe it inspired the film Heavenly Creatures, which I haven't seen. But I thought that was very interesting. So there we go. And then the other book that I have read was a NetGalley. It's called The Midnight Carousel. I will just have to check who the author is. It's by Fiza, Saeed, McLynn. I think I'm right in saying it's a debut novel. So I read this on NetGalley. I have stopped requesting NetGalley books because I just don't really like reading ebooks. It's just not a way that I enjoy reading, and it tends to take me longer to get through an ebook, and that was the case with this one. Because like I don't take it to work with me, I don't read it right before I go to bed, and honestly with this one there were definitely points where I forgot I was reading it until I went to log a book on Storygraph that I'd finished, like a physical book I'd finished, and I'd see this on and I was like, oh yeah, I'm meant to be reading that one as well. So I think all of that doesn't help with my enjoyment of reading ebooks. So anyway, I didn't actually request this one on NetGalley. The publisher emailed me, as I'm sure they emailed many other NetGalley users at the same time, to say, because you liked Katie Lumsden's book so much, I think in particular The Secrets of Heartwood Hall, they thought that I would really like this one as well. Obviously it's published by the same people, and I had a look at the blurb for this one and I was like, yeah, that sounds interesting. So I did like download it. I need to write a review for NetGalley. Remind me to do that later. So I didn't sort of request it, but yeah, I ended up getting it through NetGalley. And I did enjoy it overall. I do think my enjoyment was sort of affected by just the sporadic way in which I read it. So it's a historical mystery set in the like early 1900s, between I think Paris and London, and it surrounds, it's to do with this mystery around this carousel. So literally a carousel with like horses on it, like a fairground ride thing. And in essence, the central mystery is to do with how children who have ridden this certain horse have disappeared, like over the years. So we follow, like at the start of the book, we see the guy who creates and builds the carousel, and then we have different characters who like own the carousel and stuff like that. I won't go into detail about them, largely because I've forgotten the details. But overall, I did enjoy it. I thought it was a good mystery. I was intrigued to find out sort of what was going on. Would I read more from the author? Probably, I think, if you know, the blurb sounded intriguing to me. But I'd probably try and read a physical copy because I really just don't get on with ebooks. I'm not saying ebooks aren't a good thing in general. Just for me, I do struggle with them quite a lot. So that was my ebook. So let me tell you about 2 DNFs. It's funny because, so out of the library books I've got out at the moment, 2 of them have holds on them. So I'll take them back tomorrow. Both of those I've DNF'd. So first is Under the Eye of the Big Bird by Hiromi Kawakami. This is translated from Japanese by Asa Yaneda. This is on the International Booker long list and I think short list. So it's sort of interconnected short stories. It's sci-fi. It looks at a future where reproduction looks very different. I read maybe 3 of the stories and they just didn't really do anything for me. Like, I feel like one of those stories in isolation amongst a different story collection might have been okay for me, but I just felt like the stories weren't different enough to be interesting, and I didn't entirely like the writing style. I don't quite know why. I haven't read from this author before, but yeah, it just wasn't really doing anything for me, so I DNF'd it. And then the other book I DNF'd, I read about 100 pages of this one. This is The Lamb by Lucy Rose. This is a recently published book, and it's about this mother and daughter. How old is this daughter? I feel like she's maybe 13. I could be wrong. Who live in this house in the woods. They live a very isolated life, and they sort of capture what they call strays, these people who come into their lives, and they eat them. And that's not a spoiler, we know that from the blurb. The very first sentence is, "On my 4th birthday, I plucked 6 severed fingers from the shower drain." So, I think one of the reasons I didn't like it, and maybe I should have guessed this was going to be the case, is because it does have kind of a fairy tale, folklore tale feel to it. And that's just not something I tend to like. I don't know why, but when I've tried other books that have sort of like a fairy tale feel to them, they never quite work for me. I don't know what that is. I think maybe I don't really like whimsy. I mean, this is obviously like cannibals with whimsy, but it just tends to not work for me. And as you can imagine, it was quite gruesome. And there's just like, as well as the cannibal stuff, there was like lots of talk about mould, and it just didn't do anything for me, so I DNF'd it. So that, I think, is everything I've read and DNF'd so far in April. There was another prompt I meant to talk about and I forgot, and this is for Charlie's books for bowel cancer. So the symptom is feeling tired all the time, but you're not sure why, and the prompt is a self-care prompt to do something to treat yourself. Now, I don't need much convincing to do something to treat myself, but I'm going to say, I mean, I'm doing that this very day. I had a few chores to do first thing this morning, and since then I've been reading, watched a bit of telly, hung out with the cat. I'm going to have a bath, I think, after this and start a new book. So I'm going to say that self-care prompt is going to be ticked off today. So I have 7 days off work now. I am hoping to do quite a bit of reading. I'm making some more headway with these with the readathons that I committed to participating in, and also reading some of these library books. It is my birthday in a few days' time. I'll be the grand old age of 43. So I do have plans for my birthday, like seeing family and stuff. Other than that, I don't have too much planned, so I'm hoping to just like have a lovely time, having a rest and doing some reading. So I think that's everything for today. I will check in with you once I've read a few more books. Hi, it's Tuesday the 22nd of April. I filmed this clip yesterday and the volume didn't work, so I'm doing it again today. I've read 5 books so far since we last spoke, and we do have a whole week left of April, so hopefully there will be yet more books to be read. Only one of the books that I finished is for one of the readathons, and it's for Charlie's readathon. And it's for the symptom of losing weight but you're not sure why, and the prompt is to read a book with fewer than 400 pages. So for that I chose The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, which I thought was quite a remarkable book. Toni Morrison could write, couldn't she? I mean, I know it's hardly a revelation to say that because she won the Nobel Prize for Literature, but she could write. So this is about a young girl called Pekala, who we know from like the first couple of pages something devastating is going to happen to her. The story is not actually narrated by her, it's narrated by another child called Claudia. And as we go through the story, we sort of flip back in time and we see what life is like for Pekala and for Claudia and for and the book really focuses on, what's the phrase that Toni Morrison uses? Racial self-loathing. So we see how these young girls feel invisible to the white adults around them, whether that be like in a shop or whatever, and they see how beauty is associated with having white skin and blue eyes. And so Pekala dreams of having the bluest eyes because that means she will be beautiful. The book is difficult to read at times, as I think with most, if not all, of Toni Morrison's work. It looks at some really sort of difficult topics, but Toni Morrison's writing is so impactful, you know, especially such a short book as this. This is only the second Toni Morrison I've read. The other one is Sula, which I loved, and also which is a very short book. But Toni Morrison's writing is excellent, and I really liked the direction this book went in. I will say that the story graph summary basically spoils the story. It like tells you the whole plot from beginning to end, so avoid that if you don't want to be spoiled for it. But yeah, I mean, I thought this was incredible. I do want to read all of Toni Morrison's work, and I'm probably going to read it now in chronological order if I can. So I started off with Sula, which is actually Toni Morrison's second novel, and then I've read The Bluest Eye, which is her first. But the next one chronologically, I think, is Song of Solomon, which I have, I think, on my shelf over there somewhere. And then I think it might be Tar Baby, and then Beloved, which I do have a copy of. And then there's a few more after that. But yeah, this is great. Highly recommend. So the other books I've read are all library books. I did some planning for a video I'll be doing, which should be out by the time this is up, so I'll link it down below, on my reading check-in for the year so far, how I'm doing with my goals. Let me tell you, the goal of reading from my shelves is going pretty awful and far worse than I thought it was going. Hence all these library books. So I read this tiny little short story from Ishiguro, Come Rain or Come Shine. It's a little Faber edition, and they had a few of these in the library display when I was there recently, so I thought I would pick this one up. I love Ishiguro's writing, and I have read this before. I didn't remember it, but this was first published in his short story collection Nocturnes, which I have read many years ago. So this short story is about two friends who they were friends at university, and as adults they meet up again, and it's sort of about their lives and relationships, and it looks very much at memory, as Kazuo Ishiguro does through most of his work. So I enjoyed that. Then a book that I was really looking forward to and didn't really like that much is Victorian Psycho by Virginia Feito. So I read Virginia Feito's previous novel, Mrs. March, and enjoyed that one. This one I was expecting to like because it's gothic. It's about a governess who, Winifred, it's set in the 1800s, about a governess who goes to stay with this family. It's dark, it's gruesome, and the protagonist is, I guess, kind of unlikable. All things I thought I would love, and it just didn't really do anything for me. I don't know why. I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it. I didn't really find it that funny, and I literally can't remember anything about this, even though I only read it a few days ago. So yeah, that was a bit of a flop. Next is a horror novel, The Watches by A.M. Shine. So I have mixed feelings on this. This is about a woman called Mina who is driving. It's set in Ireland, and she has been tasked and paid to deliver this parrot, some sort of bird, I think it's a parrot, to deliver this parrot somewhere. And so she's driving along, her car breaks down, her and the parrot end up going on foot into the forest, and it all goes wrong from there. So the Watchers are these, some sort of creatures that come out at night and hunt humans. And so Mina, in the forest, she encounters a couple of other people, and it's really, I guess, a survival story about them trying to avoid these watchers. So there were aspects of the book that I thought were creepy, which I liked, and there were aspects of the plotting as we moved through, which I thought were interesting. I think one of the aspects of the reveal was way too heavily seeded by the author, to the point that I was thinking this must be a red herring, because the author literally keeps mentioning this thing and making it so obvious where this must be going that it must be a red herring, and it wasn't. So that was a little bit disappointing, because I like to be surprised. I don't want to be able to figure out sort of where things are going, and I didn't figure everything out, but a big part of it was kind of obvious. This is the first in, I'm going to say, a series. I don't know if it's just 2 books or any more than that. And I think I knew that going into it, because it's been made into a film and or television series, I think. So it very much finishes setting itself up for a sequel. So I should have realised that going into it, because I don't really like book series where the narrative goes over a number of books. I'm okay with, like, in crime fiction, where each novel has its own contained story, but something like this, I know I'm not going to read the second one. Even when I've really enjoyed books, I very rarely go on to read like more in the series, partly because I have the world's worst memory, so like I would have forgotten everything in the first book. But it was kind of frustrating the way that this book finished. So yeah, it was okay, but it wasn't amazing. But next is a book that I really did enjoy a lot, and that is Stag Dance by Torrey. So this is a short story collection. It's sort of 3 short stories and 1 novella, which Torrey has written sort of over the last 10 years or so. A couple of them, I believe, have been published on Torrey website previously. And similar to Torrey novel Detransition Baby, which I really loved, this looks at aspects of gender identity and sexuality. I really like Torrey writing. I think she is such a bold voice and such an important voice at the moment, that I really would recommend reading her stuff. My personal favourite in this collection is called Infect Your Friends and Loved Ones, and it's a speculative story about a world where people's hormones become affected by this contagion, and we see sort of the impact that this has. And what the story does is it goes back to explore the origins of this pandemic, I guess. And I particularly liked the rage within that story. I thought that was so well done. So I would highly recommend this one. So I'm back at work tomorrow, sadly, but we do still have a week left of April. I've actually almost finished another book, which I'll wait till the final clip to talk about, because there's no point talking about it now, but I'm very nearly finished Greta and Valden. I only started that yesterday. And I'm about halfway through this short story collection, Mystery Lights. So I'm looking at my TBR for April. There's 5 more books on that TBR from my physical TBR for April. I'm not going to read them all. One's a play, which I can probably read next weekend in a couple of hours. And then I reckon I can get 1 or 2 of those read, depending. Some of them are very intimidating to me, like there's a sci-fi there, which I think is going to be the next one I pick up, which is very intimidating to me, but I do want to give it a go. And I did go to the library this morning and pick up 3 more books. But anyway, right, I'll speak to you at the end of the month. It's now May, and I've almost finished my 2nd book in May, so it's about time that I finish talking about the books that I read in April. So I did finish, how am I going to do this? 5 more books, including a 4.5 star, but I also have 1 DNF. So we'll do the readathon books first. So for Charlie's readathon, the symptom is a change in how often you poo or regularly having diarrhea or constipation. And the prompt for that symptom is a book that's different to your norm. That could be by genre or format. So the book that I intended to read for that is Waist Tied by Chen Qiifan. This is translated by Ken Liu. This is a sci-fi novel, and I DNF this quite early on. You are sort of immediately thrust into a lot of action happening, a lot of characters, and whilst this is probably a very good book, it just wasn't for me. It looks at like climate change and that sort of thing, but I think this can get unhauled, and I'm sure someone else will enjoy it much more than me. So I have doubled up for that prompt for Charlie's readathon with one of the prompts for Katie's readathon, using this book, Alushita by Luigi Pirandello. So this definitely fulfills Charlie's prompt, a book that's different to your norm, because this is a play, and this is probably only like, I don't know, the fourth play I've read in my life, maybe. I must have read more than that. No more than maybe 5 or 6, and a couple of them were Shakespeare. So I really don't read a lot of plays. So it does fulfil that prompt, and the reason I was reading it was for Katie's prompt for the TBR clearout readathon, which is to read one of the shortest books on your TBR. This is very, very short. So this contains an introduction and translation by Emanuela Ciavato and Doug Thompson. So the play itself is about these two characters who are ghosts. It's set in a cemetery, and one of the ghosts is just referred to as the philosopher and the other is referred to as the fat man. And they have these slightly bizarre sort of conversations about the meaning of life, or the meaningless of life, and sort of existentialism, the nature of identity, the sort of creation of the self. I read the play and then I read the introduction. The introduction in this edition is about 20 pages long, and that really helped me to understand the play, because I don't read, as I've said, many plays. I think I'd be the same with poetry. I kind of need someone to tell me what it means. But overall, having read the introduction and the play, I really liked it, actually. I liked the themes that it is exploring. So much so that I'm kind of tempted to pick up another play by Pirandello. I haven't checked. Surely I can get it from one of my libraries. So I think his most famous play was called 6 Characters in Search of an Author, and I think again that looks at sort of the nature of self and identity, so I'd be quite interested in picking that one up at some point. So this one, I should say, in this edition, Alushita is translated as The Way Out, and the play was first published in 1916. So yeah, I liked that. That was sort of quite a surprising win. So I've got a couple more books that I read for Katie's readathon, and then a couple of library books that I read. So for Katie's readathon, for the prompt, read a book from your TBR that you fear you've lost interest in, I read Tom Brown's Body by Gladys Mitchell. So the reason I feared I'd lost interest in this is a book I picked up at a charity shop maybe a couple of years ago, and I have tried to read a couple of Gladys Mitchell books in the past and never got on with them. I've never made it to the end. I've always DNF'd. And also my dad has the same experience with Gladys Mitchell too. So this one sort of has survived on my shelves because when I did my triad chapter last year, I quite enjoyed the first chapter, but I was kind of expecting this to be a DNF, but I really quite enjoyed it, to the point that I would read more by Gladys Mitchell. And it's interesting, isn't it, because even some of my favourite authors, there are some books by them that I think are rubbish. So, for example, Agatha Christie, who is probably my favourite, like, mystery writer of all time. there are some of her books that I really don't like. So maybe I've just started with a couple of Duff Gladys Mitchells. I would be interested to read more, and she wrote a lot of books. She wrote like all those books. So in this one, it's set at a boys' school, and one of the teachers is found murdered. And so we get this investigation. I thought the characters were really interesting. It was well plotted. The she's not a detective, but the like investigator type character is Mrs. Bradley, and I thought she was a really interesting character. I'm not entirely sure what her profession is, because I think at one point she was described as a psychiatrist, at another point she was described as some sort of psychologist. Obviously those are different things, so I wasn't entirely clear of her background, but that didn't really matter. She sort of was helping along the police investigation, interviewing people. She is quite a bold character. There are points in the book where she sort of, a bit like Poirot, I guess, she sort of says, you know, she knows what's going on, but she's just trying to like get more evidence and stuff like that. So I liked her as a character. I'd like to read more from her. So this was actually a surprising win. I must tell my dad that I quite enjoyed this one, just in case he wants to read it. I don't think he will. And then the final book I read for Katie's readathon, for the prompt of read a book that's been on your TBR for a very long time, I read Peace Talks by Tim Finch. So this is a book that is only on my physical TBR by chance. It was on the Costa shortlist 4 or 5 years ago, and I won a copy of all the books on that shortlist, which is how this came into my life. And I was quite surprised by this. I liked this more than I was expecting to. So we are following a senior diplomat. He is, I think he's Norwegian, but he works in Europe in sort of negotiating peace deals between different like countries, or, you know, warring people. And so the story is told from his point of view, and it's quite introspective. I think I was just expecting it to be a bit more action-packed in a way that I didn't think I was going to like. But it was very internal, very much on his sort of musings. And he has a wife who is absent from the novel as a person, but her character is very much there because he sort of thinks about his relationship with her and so on. And as we go through the book, we find out more about where she is and what's happened to her. I will say that there is quite a lot of violence in the book, and I think for the most part it's off page, but still described. And I thought overall it was quite an impactful book as well. So I did enjoy it because I quite like books that are quite introspective. And it was from a point of view of a character that I've never really read sort of anyone sort of doing that profession before. So I thought it was an interesting read. Probably one that I will unhaul though, but I am pleased that I've finally read it. So those are the books that I read for the readathons. Let's mention this one now because I didn't quite read all the books that I said I was going to in my TBR video for April. One of the prompts for Katie's readathon was to read one of the longest books on your TBR, and this is the one that I didn't get to. My Name is Red by Orhan Pamuk, but this is going to go on to May's TBR. So actually that's not too bad because I was expecting there to be at least sort of maybe 2 or 3 books from these readathons that I maybe wouldn't have time to get to in April. So actually that's not too bad. So I have got 2 more library books to talk about. But overall in April I read 17 books. A couple of them were like really short, as you've seen. 7 from my physical TBR, 1 was a NetGalley, 9 from the library. 2 of those were for book clubs though. So that's not bad. So the final two books then, these are both library books. Greta and Valden by Rebecca R. Riley is a book that I read for my work book club. I think I'm leaving my work book club. I might have already left. I didn't go to the meeting where they discussed this book. And if I wasn't reading it for a book club, there's a chance I would have DNF'd this in the first part. Overall, I quite enjoyed it, but there were sort of a section in the middle where it felt like a bit of a slog to get through, and I felt like my reading experience was sort of weighed down by, there were just lots of like side plots and lots of different characters, and it felt a little bit all over the place at certain points, but overall I quite enjoyed it. What is it about? It's about Greta and Valden, who are brother and sister, and yeah, it's about their lives, their different like relationships with other people. It is a very queer book, which I did enjoy, and their family is a Maori Russian Catalonian family, and the author is a Maori novelist from New Zealand. So I thought that was interesting because I'm not sure I've read anything either by an author or including characters with a Maori background before. So yeah, there were definitely aspects of the book. It's quite a, what would I say? Like a drama. Like there's little bits that are kind of funny, there's serious bits, sort of with various characters and their love lives and different things like that. So there were definitely bits that I liked, but it did feel a little, I don't know, over the place at certain points. But that was that one. And then, one of my favourite books of the year so far, actually, is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. So this is the book that I gave 4.5 to. I've only had 1 5-star this year so far, but I've had a few 4.5s. So, I've been wanting to read this book since it was published, I think, last year, and I've heard a number of other people talk about it. And I finally found a copy in the library. I read this last weekend, and it was a really quick read. It's longish. How many pages is it? Like just over 400 pages. But I read it really quickly because from the first page to the last page, I was completely gripped. I found it very much a page turner. I bumped this up in my reading schedule because someone else had put a hold on it. Even though at the time they put a hold on it, so I couldn't renew it anymore, there was 14 other available copies in the library system, including one at the branch that I got this from. So I didn't really understand why that meant this person who'd put a hold on needed this exact copy and not one of the other 14 copies available. As it turns out, that person then took the hold off, so I was able to renew it, which is why I still now have the copy with me. Anyway, God of the Woods, what's this about? It is about this like camp that takes place. Where is it set? Somewhere in the USA. That's nice and vague. I'm sorry, I don't remember. And so in the present day, this teenage girl has gone missing, and we see the investigation that follows. But several years previously, 14 years previously, her brother disappeared as well, in the same place. And so the book is told from a couple of different time periods, looking at those two incidences, and from several character perspectives, so including staff who work at this like campsite. Is that the right word? It's sort of like a big sprawling thing. So the family who own the land are very well off, and then we have the people who actually sort of run this what's the word? Like a camping experience for young people. So the book is told from various characters' perspectives, people who work there, other young people who were there on the campsite, members of the family, investigators, and so on. And even though there were quite a few different perspectives, I never felt lost within that. I had a clear sense of the different characters. The title, actually, I thought was interesting. That's the only bit I've tabbed, because I never knew why it was called The God of the Woods. And apparently, I didn't know this, the word panic comes from the Greek god Pan, who was the god of the woods. And he liked to trick people to confuse and disorient them until they lost their bearings and their minds. And obviously that it's called that because of these young people going missing. I thought this was great, a really, really engaging thriller. It's interesting. To me, this is marketed as a literary thriller, and sometimes I really like literary thrillers, and sometimes they really don't work for me. I think when someone uses the term literary thriller, I sort of imagine it's going to be a thriller, but a little bit boring. And this wasn't like that. This, there are two different like author quotes, one on the front, one on the back, that specifically call it a literary thriller. So that's very much how it's been pushed by the publisher. But I think you could give this a different title, a different cover, and could have published this as just a contemporary thriller, not a literary thriller. I have an issue with the word literary anyway, but you could definitely have published this as a contemporary thriller, and I think it would have fit in that space as well. Very pacey, just really, really enjoyable. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah, thought it was great. So, is that the last book that I read? That is all of the books that I read in April. So April was a pretty good reading month, as I say. 17 books read in total. A couple of them very short. One of them really a short story. That's the one by Ishiguro. But I'm quite pleased with how I've done with reading some books from my physical TBR. I have recently put up my goals video, my sort of goals checking, stats checking video, so I'll link that down below in case you're interested in how my reading is going this year so far. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate everyone who takes the time to watch these videos. If you've made it this far and you don't know what to comment, leave me what should we leave? How about a dove emoji? Is there a dove emoji for peace, maybe? If you don't know what to comment. So yeah, I do hope you're doing well. Thank you for watching. I'll speak to you again very soon. Bye.